Pat Kirwan of CBS Sports, and also moving the chains weekday afternoons on NFL Radio. Just got done broadcasting his 21st consecutive NFL draft. How was it for you, all of you in different locations?
It worked out well. There were some glitches. We had a different producer basically every day, and everyone has their own style of how to massage the whole thing. And we added Rick Neuheisel on the third day. So you had a lot of people chiming in but mostly it worked fine because the draft went off without any technical hitches. We were prepared for a half-hour delay somewhere along the line that if it went down, what would we do? And we never had to employ that. So on that level, really, it worked out fine.
Well, if I work drafts for the rest of my life, I'll come close to getting to working half as many as you after doing that. And David and I had a lot of fun. But, Pat, one of the teams, and I'm sure you've already talked to them, we can go after the Packers or the Bears, but Seattle was the team that in every round, as David said during our coverage, groupthink is not part of what the Seattle Seahawks do. There was not a pick that was anywhere near where people thought guys were supposed to go. So just kind of break down what the Seahawks did, what Pete Carroll and his group are thinking about, because they do the draft differently.
They do, and they always have. They were booed when they took Frank Clark. They were booed when they took Bruce Irvin. People sat in amazement about those, and Russell Wilson was a third-round pick, so no one really cared at the time. But their first-round picks have been fairly controversial. And just talking to Pete about it, and really Gil Brandt's opinion first, Gil thought Brooks was a really good player, and I know that they're looking for a starting linebacker, and they felt this guy could come in and be either the Sam or the Will, and in time, when Bobby retires, move in and be the Mike. So that's what they like about him. But no one will like that pick because no one saw him as a first rounder. Almost all of us saw him as a second rounder. So Pete could care less about that. The Darrell Taylor one is interesting. Pete made it clear that we got him in here before everything got shut down. He said if I had not brought him in, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But he has a lot of talent, but he's got some issues, and he's kind of one of those guys that people shied away from for his maybe bizarre behaviors at time or maybe hard to coach kind of reputation that he had. But that's Pete. He loves those guys. He always feels like he can sell into them, here's your chance to clean that up. And he really did that with Bruce Irvin, and he certainly did with Frank Clark. So he's not afraid of it. He's looking for guys that can rush the passer, that have talent. When you get around Pete as much as I have, those things are never barriers to him. If he gets a good feel for the guy during the interview, he will ignore everyone else's recommendations to stay away. He kind of likes these challenges, as does Andy Reid, by the way. If you study Andy Reid, you'll see that he's taken a lot of risk players himself. He doesn't get burned all the time, and Kareem Hunt was a burn job. But most times he's going to take them just like Pete does, and those guys feel like they have something to offer. The rest of the draft, Lewis will plug in as one of those kind of power run guards that he's always looking for. I don't know where Colby Parkinson will end up. Colby Parkinson is going to be the recipient of Russell Wilson scrambling and finding him and hitting him. They've been doing that with different tight ends for a long time. DJ Dallas, well, would it be a Seattle draft without a running back? And he just puts another one in the stable. So he needs 4. Last year he got everyone hurt. He had to go get Marshawn out of retirement. I don't think he really wants to keep having to do that. So that's that stuff. The rest of it, I don't know if they'll make it. He's very interested in experimenting with guys and then dropping them onto the practice squad if they don't make it right away. Alton Robinson, another thing we always track with Seattle is they like the Senior Bowl. That's their chance to see guys live, and with all the things that got canceled, the Senior Bowl was Alton Robinson's opportunity. He didn't do much all week, I thought, but in the game, he had really good get-off, and Pete sees a guy that gets out of his stance and gets upfield. He thinks he can coach the rest of it. So, yeah, strange draft, to say the least. My caution to myself first and everyone else is don't grade Seattle right away because those guys seem to figure it out and get them going.
Yeah, we quoted the 2012 draft where the first three rounds were Irvin, Wagner, and Russell Wilson, and that got universally panned and seemed to work out okay. He's Pat Kirwan. He's joining us on the Goldberg Noon Abraham Law Firm Hotline. Local people, local practice, local knowledge, goldberg-law.com. And Pat's weekly appearances are always brought to us, have been for over a decade, courtesy of Pinchers. Well, quickly, Pat, overall, the Dolphins came in with 14 picks. They used 11 of them and traded one to get Matt Breida at running back. And then the Bucks did what they did, made the first ever virtual trade, as it turned out, in NFL draft history. Quickly, just your thoughts on what the Bucks and Dolphins did.
Yeah, fast on Miami. My first challenge is, they took to us, so that's fine. That's their prerogative to do it. I don't think the building was a consensus on that, but they did it, so let's stop worrying about it, and let's hope the guy gets healthy enough to play and be the guy he was at Alabama, and then they will have made a good choice. The first thing is, did they replace talent for talent? Because that's what this draft was about, David and Mark. We've talked about it 100 times. You let Tunsil go and Fitzpatrick go, and the running back goes out to Arizona for nothing, and Robert Quinn's out of there. So you start asking yourself, is Austin Jackson legitimately a replacement for Tunsil? Well, time will tell, but you really would have to suspect not. And then you start thinking, do they blow it with Fitzpatrick? Well, yeah, according to the way he played in Pittsburgh. So the thing, and I won't judge that until we see him play for a year, but that's what they wanted to do. Dump big-time players for draft picks and then bet on the draft that they would rebuild a team better than the talent they gave away. I said to you guys before, it's the great experiment. Not so sure it'll work. I do like Jackson as a pick, or where they took him. I'll tell you, I like Noah a lot. Igbenogany. And, I had my cross-checker who watches guys when I have a controversial grade, thought he was as good, and this is a guy who played cornerback, thought he was as good as Okudah. Whether he is or not doesn't matter, but I respect the opinion of that guy. Robert Hunt thought they might have taken him early. Raekwon Davis, controversial pick. You do a lot of Southeast Conference games, Dave. And, he shows up. He was better 2 or 3 years ago than he was recently. I like Solomon Kindley. Brandon Jones remains. Is Brandon Jones Minka Fitzpatrick? I don't think so. I like Strobridge as a utility kind of backup. He'll never be famous, but he'll probably play a lot of snaps. Curtis Weaver, I thought they stole a guy that can rush the passer. I don't know. The draft is a lot of names. Do they all make the team? That's the other part of this. I don't care how much they were trying to rebuild. Will they all make it? Not so sure of that. Tampa Bay, I talked to Bruce Arians right after his pick. He was as happy as could be. He tried to bump up a couple times, couldn't do it. Finally got the San Francisco thing to swap out, and he got the tackle. He's like me, or I'm like him, excuse me. He's just trying to protect Grady, and Tristan Wirfs will do that.
Yeah, great pick, and we thought, from Miami's standpoint, there was a couple of running backs that they had the opportunity to get, whether it was late in the first round or in the second round, and missed out on Dobbins, missed out on Swift, and they could have had opportunities to get some of these players and did not. When the top of the draft, I was critical when we did it. I've always used the analogy, 1,000,000 times zero is still zero. And Detroit, I know, wanted to sell the pick. Did you hear anything as to why either the Chargers or Dolphins didn't move with Detroit? Because to me, anything's better than nothing. And if they wanted to get Okudah, they would have got him at 5. They would have got him at 6. So why no movement?
Well, I think they knew that those teams were taking a quarterback, and they didn't get a deal done. I talked to Steve Keim from Arizona yesterday, and he was down, and they landed up getting Simmons, which was a great pick for them. But I was more involved and interested in hearing him talk about why he didn't, or did he expect Simmons to get to him, and why he didn't think about moving up. And he said, real late, the guys started to all see the draft basically the same way, that it would all fall out this way. So back to your Detroit thing, I always felt Detroit could have traded out, but the Dolphins and the Chargers really didn't need to move up, and that's what they finally concluded. We'll get our quarterback here, and nobody too far down was going to threaten them by moving into Detroit's spot because Detroit didn't want to move down as far as maybe the only offers were. Because once Miami and the Chargers said, "Nah, we'll stay here. We'll get our guy without moving," then the challenge came back to Detroit. Do you want to go all the way down to where someone else might want a quarterback? And they clearly didn't want to do that. So they might have gotten – we're going to talk to those. So I think they had their own rules. We'll go down to Miami spot or Chargers spot. We won't go any lower than that. Once you say – and that's a good thing because I think if they went too far, they would have lost Okudah. Now, we could argue that maybe they overrated Okudah, but I don't think they wanted. And they weren't going down so far that maybe that's the risk of losing him.
He's Pat Kirwan, CBS's NFL Today show, moving the chains weekday afternoons with Jim Miller on NFL Radio, and he joins us once again courtesy of Pinchers. The Raiders, the top end of their draft, they nailed it last year. Pat, I don't know if anyone's ever taken 3 wide receivers in their first 4 picks before, at least not recently, but they had the worst wide receiving core in the league. If a team has an awful offensive line and they spend 3 of their first 4 picks on offensive linemen, we give them great reviews. The Raiders got panned for taking 3 receivers. And also, your thoughts, where did you have Arnett, the cornerback from Ohio State, who they took 19th? Your thoughts on what the Raiders did?
Yeah, I'll start with Arnett. I've interviewed Arnett many times, watched him a lot because of Okudah. You can't help but watch him as well. So after he ran almost 4.6, everyone dropped him out of the first round. Prior to that, I think a lot of guys saw him at the bottom of the first, somewhere in the 20s. As soon as he ran slow, everyone that wasn't doing their homework put him in the second round. Okay, I felt the same way. So what was told to me? Oh, so you think he's there? I said, yeah, I'm moving him down. So one of my GM buddies goes, well, go watch his 40-yard dash. I said, okay, that's fair. So everyone's got the combine stuff, and I went and watched it. And he kind of slipped coming out. And there are people that swear he's run many, many times in the high 4.4s and 4.5 flats. So that would be fine if that was true. So in a sense, so I challenged Arnett with that the other day. I said, tell me about your 40-yard dash. This is after he was picked. He goes, well, I was really one of the guys who got hurt by no pro day because I slipped. And I said, well, I'm thinking, okay, he's kind of verifying what I just watched because I was told to watch it. He's okay. Here's the things about him that I don't like. He's likable because he's feisty as could be. He's nasty. He's kind of like takes shots at guys. He likes to be the physical corner. What I don't like is I thought, and this is my evaluation, I caught him a couple times not switching with a safety or a nickel corner on a switch route, and then all of a sudden the guy's wide open. So I wonder a little bit about him, upstairs. And he's St. Thomas Aquinas guys. We all kind of know how they produce players, but it's okay. I don't think I would take him that high. And really the question is, this is the art of the draft. You have to know where to take guys. So David, your question is, did you have to take him there to get him? And that would be the question that I probably would ask myself over and over again. I probably would think I could draft lower and get him. That would be my guess. So that one could be criticized. They're not the only team to take 3 wide receivers in the draft. Denver took 3 wide receivers, as did the Philadelphia Eagles. So taking 3 wide receivers, which I think is unusual as well, with this 11 personnel world that we're in, and that the number one personnel group that's used is 3 wides, it doesn't shock us that this draft had a lot of guys, number one, that were going to be taken in the draft. I think 35, 37, whatever the final count was, plus all the kids that they signed after this. Can you imagine drafting 35 guys and then the Vikings drop $100,000 on an undrafted receiver? That just tells you how really deep it was. So, yeah, it's kind of strange that way. People want to criticize the Raider draft because, for the same reasons you said, well, they were great last year. Now they have a bad draft. Time will tell if it's bad. I think Henry Ruggs will be a star in that place, so we'll see. Can you get to 3 starters? That's my barometer for greatness. A year from now, if they generated 3 starters from the draft, then we can laugh at the people who didn't like their draft.
Well, if you and David and I are all right on Ruggs, I still think Al came down from the skies and tapped everybody on the shoulder and said, draft the fast guy right now. And they did, which I absolutely love.
I love that you said that, Mark, because the voice of Al, you know where it comes from now?
Mark?
Mouth of John Gruden. John Gruden still is a believer in the disciple Al Davis. He lives the philosophies that Al had, and I guarantee you John was the impetus for that. And so I think the spirit of Al lives in John, to tell you the truth. Every time I'm there.
Pat, with the Eagles, you made the comment, so I'm going to ask it this way. It seems then, based on what you thought, that the Eagles did not think they could get Jalen Hurts in the 3rd round. Before the draft started, when David and I talked about Hurts on our show Friday, I said if anybody other than Baltimore takes him in the 2nd round, I feel it's a round too early. But based on your philosophy, talk to me about the Eagles. One, they take the TCU receiver instead of Jefferson. That's going to be questioned. But I do think they got some good help and depth on the line. The late lineman they got from Auburn I thought was supposed to go a lot higher. But specifically on Hurts and the receiver and just your breakdown of the Eagles.
Yeah, well, they had it. You said it. They had their choice. I talked to someone in Philly the morning of the draft, and they were hoping for the right receiver, and they had a chance for Jefferson. So, quote unquote, the right receiver for them was Reagor. They did not think they had to move up. There was not someone they were willing to give up a bunch to go up and get, like Ruggs or Judy. They were happy to be in that second. They knew all along that they were probably in that second wave of receivers. They spent a lot of their evaluation time on that group, and they like Reagor. Now, Reagor is faster than he ran at the combine, I can tell you. He's got documented track times. He ran a 10-2 100 meters, legit. So whatever he ran at combine, that's not who the guy is, and he plays real fast. So when you meet him, I sat down with the guy at the combine. He had a T-shirt on. The guy is thick. He is built. And so they got a physical guy that with legit speed, and that's what they wanted. I like Jefferson. I'm like you, Mark. I would have taken Jefferson, Mr. Smooth. I talked to Eddie O about that and the route running. He told me when Justin got to LSU, he was 150 pounds. And, he worked on it and became better. And then, of course, he was the connection with the quarterback. But Reagor, to me, and I think to the Eagles, felt like this guy has a little bit more Henry Ruggs in him. Maybe he's the poor man's Henry Ruggs when you look at him. Hurts to me, and I saw the comments about we didn't want to make another mistake like we did with Russell Wilson. I get all of that. Jalen Hurts was a productive college player, 51-5. Yeah, he was on great teams, but that guy went out to Oklahoma and basically overnight learned another offense and functioned extremely well in it. And I think a lot of people, when you sit down with Hurts, and I'm sure David has, you feel like you're talking to a leader, a real leader of men. And I think that's the kind of guy that if I'm a head coach and I train him, I believe I'm going to win games with that guy if he has to play. I know all this will have a package. Forget all that stuff for a minute. Those things are a distraction to me at times. Even the kid down in New Orleans, it drives me nuts sometimes when they put him in games. Well, it doesn't do anything for the rhythm of the game. But Jalen Hurts, as I see him sitting on the bench waiting to go if my quarterback gets hurt, there's a guy I think will be ready to go. And he will give you whatever it takes. And he might be the guy that goes 3-1, 2-2 at the worst. That's why I think they take him. And do I think the second round is a little high for it? Yeah, but if you think he's the only guy in there that has that kind of magic to him, you lose him, shame on you. So I understand why they do. And they can afford to do. They got a nice looking team. You can take a few more risks when you have a really good roster.
And it does need to be pointed out as we're running out of time with Pat that the Eagles drafted at 53 and didn't have another pick till 103. So they certainly didn't think he would be on the board then. Pat, as always, appreciate your time and your insight. All the best to you and the family. Staying safe.
Whoa. Who won the mock draft, boys? This is competition time here.
How do you win a mock draft?
What do
you pick the most you hit the target the most times.
Okay, well, we had 8 who we nailed player and team, and we got 26 of the 32.
Oh, as a combined group, I'm proud of you two. Very nicely done.
That was our mock draft totals. We nailed 8 players with 8 teams, and we got 26 of the 32 because there were a couple surprises. Like we didn't have the Dolphins the corner there at the bottom. We didn't have the Ohio State corner. We didn't have the Texas Tech linebacker that went to Seattle. So there were a few there that got us, but those were our
no
numbers.
wonder you started the show with how'd Seattle do that. I know now that why.
But I will say we had Ayuk, we had Isaiah Wilson. I mean, those were a couple of the guys that we did have going in the first round that did. So,
I lost to Gil Brandt again on my top. I got 86 of the 100. He got 89. So I lose again.
Unbelievable. Pat, as always, thanks so much.
See you, boys.